Daily Words of God. Many are the sleepless nights that God has endured for the sake of the work of mankind. From up high to the lowest depths, He has descended to the living hell in which man lives, to pass his days with man, has never complained of the shabbiness among man, has never reproached man for his disobedience, but endures the greatest humiliation as He personally carries out His work. How could God belong to hell? How could He spend His life in hell? But for the sake of all mankind, so that the whole of mankind can find rest sooner, He has endured humiliation and suffered injustice to come to earth, and personally entered into hell and Hades, into the tiger's den, to save man. How is man qualified to oppose God? What reason does he have to once more complain about God? How can he have the gall to look upon God again? God of heaven has come to this most filthy land of vice, and has never vented His grievances or complained, but instead quietly accepts the ravages and oppression of man. Never has He hit back at the unreasonable demands of man. Never has He made excessive demands of man, and never has He made unreasonable demands of man. He merely does all the work required by man without complaint, teaching, enlightening, reproaching, the refinement of words, reminding, exhorting, consoling, judging, and revealing. Which of His steps has not been for the life of man? Though He has removed the prospects and fate of man, which of the steps carried out by God has not been for the fate of man? Which of them has not been for the sake of man's survival? Which of them has not been to free man from the suffering and oppression of dark forces that are black as night? Which of them is not for the sake of man? Who can understand God's heart, which is as a loving mother? Who can comprehend God's eager heart? God's passionate heart and ardent expectations have been repaid with cold hearts, with callous, indifferent eyes, with the repeated reprimands and insults of man, with cutting remarks, and sarcasm, and belittlement. They have been repaid with man's ridicule, with his trampling and rejection, with his miscomprehension, and moaning, and estrangement, and avoidance, with nothing but deceit, attacks, and bitterness. Warm words have been met with fierce brows and the cool defiance of 1,000 wagging fingers. God can but endure, head bowed, serving people like a willing ox. How many suns and moons, how many times has He faced the stars? How many times has He departed at dawn and returned at dusk, and tossed and turned, enduring agony 1,000 times greater than the pain of His departure from His Father, enduring the attacks and breaking of man, and the dealing and pruning of man. God's humility and hiddenness has been repaid with the prejudice of man, with the unfair views and treatment of man, and His anonymity, forbearance, and tolerance have been repaid with man's greedy gaze, as man tries to stomp God to death without compunction and tries to trample God into the ground. Man's attitude in his treatment toward God is one of rare cleverness, and God, who is bullied and disdained by man, is crushed flat beneath the feet of tens of thousands of people, while man himself stands up high, as if he would be the king of the castle, as if he wants to take absolute power, to hold court from behind a screen, to make God the conscientious and rule-abiding director behind the scenes, who is not allowed to fight back or cause trouble. God must play the part of the last emperor. He must be a puppet, devoid of all freedom. The deeds of man are untellable, so how is he qualified to demand this or that of God? How is he qualified to propose suggestions to God? How is he qualified to demand that God sympathize with his weaknesses? How is he fit to receive God's mercy? How is he fit to receive God's magnanimity time and time again? How is he fit to receive God's forgiveness time and time again? Where is his conscience? He broke God's heart long ago. He has long since left God's heart in pieces. God came among man bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, hoping that man would be charitable toward him, even if only with a little warmth. Yet God's heart is slow to be comforted by man. All he has received are snowballing attacks and torment. Man's heart is too greedy. His desire is too great. He can never be sated. He is always mischievous and foolhardy. He never allows God any freedom or right of speech, and leaves God with no option but to submit to humiliation and allow man to manipulate him however he wishes.